Between Two Lines podcast, talking about performance, life, and everything in between. Featuring your hosts, Jonny and Ash Hamilton.
Welcome to the Between Two Lines podcast. Today I am with Konstantin Stamm, who's from Hamburg, so he's a German. He's not too far away from me, but just too far away to do the podcast in person, so we are online. Konstantin is an athletic coach. He works with a bunch of athletes in Hamburg. He's also studying to become a physiotherapist or physical therapist, depending on which country or which part of the world you're in. I'll let Konstantin give a more specific rundown of what he does, where his passions lie, and what he's been doing over the past couple of years. And then we're going to talk more specifically about blood flow restriction training today. Konstantin has a wealth of experience in the area. He also works with a couple of companies, or one company based in Denmark, who serve a bunch of pro athletes as well. So he's got a good knowledge base and experience base within that. He's also used it on himself for his own knee rehab and had a lot of great success with that. So we'd love to hear all about that. And he's just going to give us basically a crash course in blood flow restriction training, or BFR, as we'll probably refer to it from now on. So Konstantin, take it away, my man. Good to see you. Good to see you've got your coffee. That was the deal. No coffee, no podcast, I said to him. So give us a rundown, what you do, what your background is, what you're up to now, and what your plans are. You've got quite an interesting background and skill set, and what you're doing at the moment. Even the writing, I didn't mention that, so I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, hi, how are you doing? Great to see you. And I see we both have mostly our coffee with us, and of course the mustaches.
Yeah,
you sport a different style a bit.
Yeah, I can't grow it on the sides. I can get the front and the middle, and then I'm kind of fucked after that. Yeah, so I work with what I can.
Okay, yeah, I did it for New Year's Eve. We got a 20th century, what is it called? 1920 party, like the mustache style. So, and my girlfriend said she likes it, so I kept that. I'm an athletic coach from Hamburg. Since a couple of years, I work mainly in team sports, with team sports athletes, but I've also worked with ballet dancers. As you said, currently I'm doing an education also as a physiotherapist, because I want to just broaden my offer to athletes and really helping them, no matter if they're injured, if they search high performance. So that's basically what I'm doing from the educational side now. I am also, like you said, writing a lot. At the moment, I'm working on a book with a couple of colleagues on medicine ball throwing training for athletes. So that's going to be something really nice for the following year. But I have been working as an author also for a couple of websites, functional trainer website, Markt, which is a platform where you can search for education. And also an article will be released in the Trainer magazine, which is a popular German training magazine. And there will be another one in March, actually, on BFR. So
we're getting ahead of the crowd.
Yeah, a bit of it. Yeah, right.
Awesome.
And yes, as you said, I'm working with a Danish company, Occlude BFR. Basically, that stems from the fact that I, at some point, wrote with their founder, and the founder is Thomas Kortebæk, a pretty good athletic trainer from Denmark. And we got into contact over a couple of posts of him because he really puts out great knowledge. And somehow a relationship built from that. And after a couple of probably 2 or 3 months when we have been in contact, he asked me, because he saw that I'm pretty much into BFR, he asked me if I want to represent his company in Germany and giving educational courses here in person, online. It's up for the clients to decide. And that's what's also on the menu for this year. So I'm looking forward to it. And that's pretty cool. If you don't follow Thomas Kortebæk, Wiedenform, on Instagram, you should do. Everyone should do. He's just a great, humble guy, always open for discussion. So that's pretty cool.
But you showed me his Instagram. We caught up last week. When was it? Last week? 2 weeks ago for a chat, and you showed me his Instagram, I think, and he works strictly with athletes and Olympic athletes. Is that right? So he just punches out different sort of content, I guess. It's very, I don't know how to explain it. It's not too loud. He just kind of does his thing, shows his style with his athletes in the athletic gym setup or whatever. He works with a club there, doesn't he? And he just runs his stuff there, and he kind of does it in silence a little bit, right? But he's got some seriously good ideas by the looks of it.
He told me he got the luxury of not being a coach that needs Instagram, basically, because he's a lecturer at Aarhus University. He has his own company serving highly trained athletes, professional athletes, Olympians in athletics, especially in the high jump. He's an assistant coach to the national team of high jumpers or jumping team. His wife actually is the European champion in 400-meter hurdles, Sarah Slot. And he's also coach to the Aarhus handball professional team, where he oversees the training also for the academy that they have attached to it. So he says, I can put out my ideas, I can discuss with coaches, and I don't have to mind on getting clients. So he says he's a pretty nice position there, because he doesn't have to fight over something or put out content that looks fancy just to get clients. And that is a nice position. I think we're all dreaming of that. But still, he's really a humble person. You can always get in contact with him. At least that's my opinion or my experience. And that's really, really cool.
That's awesome.
So he approached me and asked me, and I directly hopped on it, because I said, I really like the method of using BFR for specific reasons. Of course, it's just like with everything, it's just a tool, right? It's not that it's the best method or the magic pill for whatever, but you can get really nice adaptations out of it, and if used in the right context, and that's pretty cool.
So we'll go into blood flow in a second. We'd just like to go a little bit deeper, I guess, in about you and what you do and what your interests are. So away from work and the profession, what else do you like to do? What things interest you and excite you? So give us like a 90-second rundown on that, and then we'll tuck into some more specific things.
Oh, what excites me? Of course, spending time with my girlfriend and my boys and my friends, family, but also I'm heavily interested in research, and I have ever been I'm probably reading, I don't know, 1.5, 2 hours each day, just reading through studies. It could be nutrition, it could be health, it could be fitness, it could be athletic training. And I actually, when people ask me, which books do you read? I often have to say, I didn't read as many books, but when I see something that interests me, I'm starting to search on Google. It's probably because I was a researcher at university after my main studies, which have been, that's why I'm on a different path here than most athletic trainers. I'm a trained historian and politician.
That's right.
Holding a master's degree, and I worked for the university for 1 year. And I always loved research. It's something that really, gets me going when I can dive into new topics here. So that's probably that's probably most of my leisure time.
That's so interesting, because I could never, every now and again, I'd read something that interests me, or I'll learn something. I have moments, at the moment, I'm in a phase where I'm really excited to learn again. Whereas the last year or year and a half, I was probably not really in that situation as much. But I find it super interesting that you actually really love reading research and all of that. I feel like I'd hit my limit after 15, 20 minutes, but it's awesome. That's awesome. I'm envious.
But actually that's probably, I don't know where the future will get me to, but I, for example, also proposed to the university where my school is attached to, and also to other university research projects, because I would love at least that's something I can really find myself into or see myself in, is like a setting where part-time I'm a researcher at university and part-time working as a coach, because I think that's the really interesting combination. Like, you're doing the real research, like seeing, okay, where can we get the field, on the same time working with athletes, and not being like what we call the Elfenbeinturm of university, where people behind closed doors as research something and have no whatsoever attachment to the real practical world. And that is something that's really interesting and where I could see myself in. But I have to see whether I can get into it, because my formal education is not sports science. And that's sometimes a bit tough because, as everyone knows, Germany is pretty tough on certification and qualifications and all that.
Yeah, that's one thing I've realized since I've been living in Germany, is how Germans just love qualifications. They love qualifications, and there's so many weird qualifications out there that, like so many personal trainers are Ernährungsberater, and which is a nutrition coach or nutrition kind of consultant, I guess it translates to. But you can't be that quickly that good at nutrition. It's just like they'll do like a weekend course. But anyway, let's tuck into the topic. Can you just give us a quick summarized, but at the same time relatively detailed rundown on what blood flow restriction training is, or BFR? And yeah, so just how you might implement it, how you might use it, and with what populations?
So basically BFR, like the name already like depicts, it's a blood flow restriction. And people oftentimes when they hear it get like, you can restrict blood flow, are you crazy? We are actually not really restricting the whole blood flow towards a specific area, but we are restricting the venous return of blood flow. So that's, of course, a difference. It's like depicting someone who gets, like you cut yourself and the blood slowly comes out. That's often the blood from veins coming out, because arteries have a much higher pressure due to their build and their function and everything else. So that would be something like you see in a movie, like sprinkling out. So we are only cutting the venous return of blood flow. So what happens? When you cut off the venous return, the blood pools in that muscle. And everyone knows that feeling, at least all those bodybuilders and fitness enthusiasts who search the pump.
Yeah, basically getting that juicy pump.
For the disco, the biceps pump and all that. So what happens? The blood pools and there's not new blood coming into it. So less oxygen is available in the muscle because there's nothing new coming in. So you get a hypoxic state, so a state where less oxygen is available. And what happens is basically when you be really not diving too much into it, you get the fast twitch fibers and the slow twitch fibers in the muscle. The slow twitch fibers being those that help you with endurance, and they rely on oxygen.
Yep.
If you cut off oxygen, they can't work, like a car who doesn't have how it's called, fuel.
Petrol, yeah.
No petrol. And what happens is the large muscle fibers, the strong muscle fibers, the fast twitch fibers take over the work to produce the necessary force for the movement. So basically that's the mechanism. But what happens afterwards is basically the body senses a stress, like he doesn't want to be hypoxic because that's what he lives on. So he puts out a lot of hormones, growth factors, in different areas. Most people actually also know the human growth factor, like growth hormone, because that's also something we know from bodybuilding. So he puts out more afterwards to protect himself. But they are also different, like IGF-1, some might know that one too. And he puts them out to a higher extent. And what happens basically is we see adaptations specifically for the muscle mass that are comparable to high load resistance training. So you work at a much lower intensity, but because that is what you can do. Like if one is familiar with 1 rep max, you can load up only with 30, 20, 40% of your 1 rep max and still see the same results towards hypertrophy like you would get with 70, 80% of your 1 rep max load.
So like in the muscles, so you're saying that basically you block off the blood flow into the muscle. It's left with with the blood, which becomes less oxygenated, or the concentration of oxygen then drops. And then that induces or requires what happens as a resulting factor is that the high twitch, fast twitch muscle fibers start to come into play, and there becomes let's say like a hormonal cocktail, as almost like a reactive response from the body saying, okay, something's not right here. We need to induce anabolism in order for it to build up and to regrow and to redevelop as the body does. Is that a correct little summary?
Yeah, right. Because basically, what's training all about? Giving stress to the body.
Yeah. Breakdown, build up.
Most often we just think about external load, more weight. But basically BFR tricks the body. It senses a threat because of the hypoxic state, and he searches to adaptations protecting himself from future damage. So BFR, that's something like you could say is a very gentle way of protecting or even building muscle mass, strength and function, even though you don't use high loads, which is not saying that high loads don't have merit. They have a lot of merit, especially for more highly trained athletes, because of course there are specific adaptations made from high load resistance training, especially in the strength realm, because BFR doesn't seem to be as good as high load resistance training for making strength gains, because that's the specificity principle. So you need more external load to really get your strength higher.
Yeah.
But that depends, of course, on the individual context. Like when you train Gen Pop, to go into an application of BFR Gen Pop, a lot of Gen Pop, they don't even have a lot of training history. They don't know external weights. They just probably go jog once or twice and do a bit of Pamela Reif workout, something like that. And of course, they see strength gains at the beginning when they work differently. So that's something to look into. And probably also future research, like most often the studies only have compared low load BFR, so 20 to 40% of 1 rep max. There are not many, at least from what I know, perhaps looking into more high load BFR training, because you could go up higher in intensity. At least in my logical sense, there could be something to go into, because, for example, there's one study on physical education students where they used BFR together with sprint training, and they had good results. So sprinting is, of course, much more intense than it is low load training, and they saw great results. So there might be also a future research realm where you could get into using BFR with a more moderate intensity or even high intensity resistance training. And probably you would see different results, but that's up for future research to decide. So.
The challenge with that will be the research conditions, I guess. So I totally agree with you. I'm not disregarding your point by any means, so please don't think that. But the challenge I find with research that I've really learned over the last couple of years is that you can really design research to get favored results, right? I think we spoke about this as well in the past. So I think I would love to see what would happen if, and again, this is a big if, because the question is then how do you design it like that? But if it was very, very neutral, so I don't know, say they just got people sprinting and then they just chose a submaximal resistance of, I don't know what the resistance was, maybe 50% or something like that, and just worked on that for 6 weeks and just did very simple sprint training without any other work and to see what would happen there. Again, then you can't influence certain other conditions like what they're doing at home and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to tuck more deeply into the topic of populations and also intensities. So based on the research, based on your own personal application and the work that you've done in the past and are currently doing, what intensities would you recommend? What set and rep schemes roughly? I know that this is always variable. I think the more that we have specific set and rep schemes and intensities, the more dangerous I think training is. I think it's better to have variability. So if we're just looking at like rough bandwidths, what would they be? So what would you be looking at? And how would you look to apply blood flow restriction training to varying populations?
So basically you have 3 training modalities with BFR, which have been researched and which have been applied. So you have passive BFR, basically someone who is immobilized, using that, just cutting off blood flow to like say after knee surgery, and to somehow trick the body into sensing a stress and to protecting what he's having in order to protect himself. I've never used that, so I can't say a lot to that.
Because you're saying, sorry to cut you off, so you're saying that because if you just cut the blood flow off, it should induce that hormonal response as we just spoke about, which should hopefully build some growth and synthesis in that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because you cut like also BFR, for example, that's a different part of it, but it induces angiogenesis, so the growth of new blood vessels. So like one could imagine, okay, you're injured and your body senses a threat, builds new blood vessels. So that should help him to heal faster because blood flow afterwards is better. So that is basically a possibility to use it in that realm, but I have never used it. So there's research on it, and they are of course doing more into that regards, but I have never used it. Then you could use blood flow with aerobic training, basically just walking around with your, for example, legs cut off. Yeah, it sounds funny, right? But you would use 5 to 20 minutes of just walking around, and that stirred a lot of interest in the community, because they found like after a couple of weeks the VO2 max went up like by I think 12%. They saw muscle growth, and they said, hey, those people were just walking around basically. But I have also not used that. Mm-hmm. What I have been extensively using is BFR low training, and from there we say like the traditional protocol actually is you're doing 30 reps, then have a break of 30 seconds, and then doing 15, 15, 15, like 4 sets, basically 75 reps in total. And you have 30 seconds of break, 15 seconds break, 15 seconds break, that's all. That's the traditional protocol. And I have used it, that's why, like, I think it's oftentimes the same with coaches. Why is something coming up into your interest? Like I had 2 meniscal tears, pain in the knee, and I tried everything to get it back on track and I couldn't. And I was really close to saying, fuck that, I searched for surgery. And it was like the last thing I tried was, okay, I use my voodoo flossing tape, cut off blood flow, because I search for opportunities to do something that induces healing somewhat and to induce loading to the tissues without actually loading. So I combined blood flow with isometric training. And I know it seems a bit crazy, and I know I had done work before, so that probably influenced also that intervention. But after a couple of weeks, my knee was pretty much fine.
So what exactly did you do with the isometric stuff? Did you not do active repetitions, rather you just held it for 30 or 60 seconds or something?
Yeah, I cut off the blood flow and I hold a deep lunge basically position. I hold it for 45, 60 seconds, because that is influenced also by research like on isometrics, which is another topic I'm pretty much into, from Keith Barr. Some might know him because
he's brilliant, isn't
he? Yeah, he put out all the research to collagen, which is pretty high up in the ranks of something popular within the athletic training community. And I used basically some of his protocols, put in BFR, and like did 3 or 4 sets of 45, 60 seconds lunge holds. And that was it basically on a lot of days, sometimes even in the morning, in the evening. And I did that over a couple of weeks, depending on how I felt. Of course, I did in between here and then also more like dynamic stuff.
With the cuff on or without?
No. Then just normal sessions, like really low intensity stuff, because my knee always started to hurt now and then. It just didn't feel right. It's like, I don't know, it's called like a more clicking, but clicking with pain. And that's why I really cut off a lot of dynamic stuff and put in that method. Because when you work isometrically, basically what also happens when you work a muscle isometrically, the muscle also is like sees reduced blood flow because he's contracted.
Yeah.
And the blood can come in to such a great extent if you work them dynamically. So I thought, okay, I combine a method that cuts off blood flow with another method that cuts off blood flow. And what happens is you see a lot of lactate coming in. And we know lactate stimulates collagen synthesis. You see growth hormone and IGF-1 being produced more. You see with BFR training, you basically see those concentrations of those two hormones, and they affect collagen tissue repair. And you also see that basically the stem cells that build up tendons, that they are stimulated. So I combine two methods that have been quite extensively been researched on topics like that, and I had great results. And that is what really was for me a sign, okay, BFR is a very interesting topic that I have to dive more into and use more. And depending on the modalities that you ask for whom would I take them? Like, you could use them basically in a lot of settings. And with my athletes or with myself, I use them, for example, also for deloads. Like, I know I'm tired from more plyometric stuff, from sprinting, whatever. And next week I'm feeling, my body is not 100%. Like, okay, I'm doing 2 or 3 sessions of BFR. Because basically what we don't see is so much muscular damage.
Well, you're taking away massive impacts too, right?
Right, that's
like,
it.
So you're taking away that pounding onto the, like, I mean, depending what you're doing, but most people are probably getting large ground reaction forces from if they're running, if they're jumping, if they're sprinting, all of that sort of stuff. And you can still get muscular stimulation to like a really good extent with the BFR without getting that force and impact loading.
Yeah, because when is damage happening towards muscles, towards tendons? So basically it's often when a tissue gets stretched under load. If I take away that, and it's often most times found, of course, elongation under force when I have an impact. So like my Achilles when I run, it elongates under force when I land and then recoils to propulse me, right? But if I take that away and still see that my body gets those signals, hey, there's a threat, adapt towards tendons and muscle, without having those negative like negative influences of the pounding, of the impact. So I can save him and still give him a signal, hey, become stronger. Because, I mean, for me, it's straightforward. So I can save myself, I can save recovery energy for the moments when it counts. So why should I take an athlete like he tells me I got a competition next week, and I think, okay, he's already fatigued. He already is accumulating a lot of fatigue. Why should I expose him to high intensity, probably prolonged stress to his tissues, when I could say, okay, let's cut the volume from the intensive pounding impact stuff. Let's add in a bit of BFR, so you're better off and you still see the adaptations.
That's a really good point, because if you add, like you obviously still want that intensity to an extent, and that high intensity and impact loading, because we need consistency of that also to stimulate progression and everything, right? From a nervous system perspective to a more local perspective, and I mean local meaning more muscular tendon perspective. But that's such an interesting point that you make about pulling back the load. Let's say like we halve or just do 60% of the load, and then we make up the rest of that intensity more locally around the muscles and tendons with the BFR. Yeah. So they're just getting their minimum that they require from an impact loading. So they're not going to have too much muscle damage from that. And then we can supplement the rest with BFR. That's a really, really good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And for example, Thomas has used it on his wife 5 weeks before I would have to lie. I think it was European Championship. And
that's okay. You can lie.
Yeah.
We're good at lying.
She had, you can see her like a bit, like a small story on the Occlude BFR account. And she had pain around the Achilles, I think, foot pain, something like that. 5 weeks until competition. And for a highly trained athlete that's like European champion, I mean, that really counts, right?
Massively.
So what they did, they cut back. They said, okay, let's try 2 to 3 weeks using BFR, slowly building back more intense volume. And she basically said the 2-3 weeks of break, mainly to impact loading, to this high intensity stuff, or that got her back to being pain-free, and she could perform the highest. And of course, I can cut back on everything and say, okay, we need more breaks. I cut back on intensive stuff. I cut back on plyometrics, on sprints, everything else. But somewhat, you have to fill in the cup a bit of a highly professional athlete, because he needs the stimulus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, there's this psychology attached to, right? Like, take someone away from his sport. Everyone knows it who loves sports. Like for me, it was horror for 2 years because I couldn't sprint and run and jump. I felt bad oftentimes because I hate stuff like just a bit of aerobic training.
Pamela Reif.
I don't know her in person, so no offense, man.
I'm sure she's nice. She does online training. She's become basically a fitness influencer in Germany, and she's massive. And
probably she's a nice person.
I'm sure she is.
So basically, when I'm training, I'm doing it all for the explosive stuff because I'm really in love with it. And that was really what was playing with my mental state, because I couldn't do it. And so BFR can be a method, like, because you also feel the pump afterwards. You feel you have been working. Like, that tricks you into a state saying, hey, I have worked. I have done my work. And I know I'm back on track probably in 2 or 3 weeks when pain is gone, because I took away all the high intensity loading, which leads to strain in the tissues and leads to more probably micro damage that adds up over time and all that. So that is really an interesting thing. And everyone I have tried BFR on, they mostly love it because they say, wow, it feels so good to have this pump. Nothing hurts basically afterwards when you are used to it. And you can see in the mirror that your muscles are bigger. So basically, I think we have spoken on that this mental thing towards training, motivational states, psychology just matters massively. And that's where BFR can be a nice supplement towards your normal training routine, because it gives you the feeling of something that you like really have worked.
Yeah. I think the other thing with that is it's not just positive psychology of training, like it is that for sure. But the other thing I've really been thinking about the last few weeks, man, is perception of training, how people actually believe that their training is. So the way you believe it and the way you believe that your life is and the story you tell yourself around life and training, that creates a whole hormonal and chemical story, or what's the word? Like a blueprint, basically. That is what your human body is. And I've consciously been working on being like extra positive and optimistic with my training and that sort of stuff recently. And I find it's just so, for me, I find it, obviously it feels nicer, but I've also been looking into some more, I guess like neuroscience based stuff around. And I think it's pretty obvious. Like if you think good thoughts and you're happy, you tend to be healthier, right? And I just wonder about that, like how much that can also influence hormonal regulation, transportation of chemicals and that sort of stuff as well. And you think like if you can influence that, and like I imagine if you're really encouraging people about whilst they're doing BFR, just like, yeah, it's really good that, you know, we're able to we got like a double win here. 1, we were able to drop your loads, but 2, we were able to maintain intensity. 3, you get a mad pump, and 4, you're still on your way. And so that was actually 4, not 2. But anyway, and so that they're feeling good, right? Like they're feeling really good. So what happens when they feel good? Positive psychology, which promotes growth again, and it becomes habitual. And I find that super, super fucking interesting. And I think that's where BFR can be so, so good if and when the person, so the coach or the therapist, implements it well. And I mean, like how they verbalize it, how they explain it, what they give for feedback and encouragement. So very, very interesting.
Yeah, for example, just one more on that. Like imagine a person and he somehow gets Achilles pain. Like it's a good example because a lot of people can relate to Achilles pain when they are runners, when they sprinters.
It fucking sucks, man, because it's not that painful. It's just annoying.
Yeah, that's right. And like think about the situation. You tell them, okay, for the next 3 or 4 weeks, we basically doing nothing, working a bit your contralateral leg. And the only thing we are doing is like movement a bit mobility, massage, a bit of like blood flow thing, like getting how it's called,
like lymph. You mean more like lymph?
Yeah, that's
like lymph drainage, that sort of stuff. Yeah,
lymph drainage, and then we massage to get more blood flow a bit in and stuff like that. All those passive modalities, but basically nothing active.
Which is so German. That's the most.
That's really German.
It's the most German approach to rehab. Just be as passive as possible. Make sure they're not standing on their feet, even though they're running-based athletes, and just do anything under the sun that
because like
be passive.
It's of course what's still told to a lot of clients, like we have to take it back, like, and just do passive about it and break and everything. Like
until you fuck 2 weeks later again once you start again.
Yeah, that's right. And start directly back in. And that fucks up your mental state, because you probably know, hey, in 3 weeks I have an important game coming up. Like I can't take 2 weeks off. Like how should I be at the highest performance level? And then comes in, you say, hey, we take back a step and I give you a modality after which you feel like you have really done a lot. And suddenly the same guy that was like in a really bad mental state because of doing nothing feels, yeah, look at my muscles, look at what I have done, and I feel like the blood pumping, I'm feeling good. And that's like, again, this feedback loop, positive feelings, influencing, of course, like the nervous system from a whole nother perspective. And you go into the bed in the evening and saying, hey, I have worked, and I know I'm on my way if I keep that going. And then he sleeps better, right? Like how often you go into bed with the thoughts rage in your head and you say, hey, shit, man, the competition will be worse when I can't work out. And there's so much attached to it, right? And so that's really interesting from that perspective.
Yeah, I find people talk about psychology within sport and training, but they more talk about it from a mental toughness perspective.
Yep.
But I feel like no one, and this is something I'm so excited to like delve into. I've been thinking about it so much. It's basically what I've been saying, and what you just reiterated and reinforced is like how does this sort of cascade, and it's like a domino effect, right? And how does this then influence their hormonal balance? Which influences the way they breathe, which influences the way they sleep, which influences probably their eating patterns and their digestion and blah, 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 the way they respond and perceive things and look at things. Like the world's more colorful when you feel good, right?
Yeah.
So when they feel like that, and the second point about that is the best I've ever felt training, I'm sure you can agree, and I think the next 1,000 people that listen to this or are on the podcast will agree. The best I felt was when I was pumping, and like I was also playing football, but I was pumping. I was doing some upper body, some lower body, some full body power and strength based work, and I had a bit of a pump, and I felt good, and I was like lean and feeling healthy and strong, and it's all positive psychology. Like, and that's, imagine it, like the training could have even been shit. Like the training was good, I found, but even if the program were crap, I still felt good because of my perception of how I was doing with the training. And yeah, I know we're going a little bit off topic, but that's, I guess, what the blood flow, I guess we're not really, because that's exactly what the point you're making. Like that's what the blood flow restriction stuff can really induce with people. What would you, so we spoke about doing the 30, 15, 15, 15 method of repetitions and sets. At what intensity was that?
It's basically 20-40% of your 1 rep max.
20 to 40%.
So,
okay.
But I have found it's probably again a different case working with highly trained athletes or athletes like in a sports, like where your body is your sole currency, like close skill work. It probably doesn't matter as much, and I don't want to be attacked on this point, but using it, I mean, for example, search some modality or search a movement in which you can go for the 30, 15, 15, and you could think about that if you can hit with the movement this pattern and be close to failure, or you fail even in like set 2 or 3 or something like that.
So like, you'd be cool with failure? You think failure within blood flow restriction training is fine? It's not too intense?
You can, yeah. But actually studies showing there's no difference, even though like you don't fail, you don't need failure. So
sorry, there's no difference. So you're saying that failure during blood flow restriction training, so failure due to fatigue, is no different to not failing during blood flow? Or do you mean that failure during blood flow
that was what I said.
Okay, yeah, cool.
So, but you could basically look for a movement that you can perform for those kind of reps, and not performing like 50 reps and you don't feel anything. That's too low intense. And not looking for a movement, probably at least in the traditional way. As I said, there probably might be more research coming up to more moderate or high intensity blood flow restriction, because for those geeks who really like to dive into, there's a case study from Alex Natera. I don't know if you know him.
Of course I know him. He's Australian, yeah.
Okay. So he has a case study on his website where they used blood flow restriction and went into higher intensities within youth athletes competing in the World Youth Athletics Championship. And they went even higher. So there might be possibilities here. But if you use the traditional makeup, just use this exercise going, and you should be able to sustain 75 reps in 4 sets. That's basically it. So you don't have to be like crazy fancy. Just for example, when I use it, I'm doing single leg lunges with, I think I use 10 kilos as an addition, so that I can work through 30, 15, 15, 50. That's it. So, or for example, my girlfriend actually loves it. because it's so fast. You don't need to really warm up. So you just need 2 or 3 minutes, getting a bit blood flow in, and then working for that. And she just do squats with, I think, 7 kilos in addition, like holding onto a medicine ball, and that's it. So look for something that hits those patterns, and then you are off to go.
So with the Alex Natero research, that was, or the case study, that was, you said he went higher with the intensity. That was the percentage intensity. So rather than 20 to 40% of someone's max, they went like 50, 60 or something, you're saying?
And his case study is heavily interesting for everyone, like who loves.
I'll link it in the show notes.
Who's
I'll find
into
it.
Training, because he had pain. I don't know exactly the specific. Was it knee? Patella? I think patella, but I'm not quite sure. And they used for 6 weeks the best practice model, like heavy, slow eccentrics and isometrics and all that, and pain wouldn't go away. But it wasn't only 6 weeks left or 8 weeks left towards World Championship. And then his trainer said, okay, let's add in BFR. We don't know what to do. We use the best practice. I'm a good trainer, probably, he said. He knows how to work out, and we still can't get the pain to go away. So they added in BFR, and they started, of course, with a more traditional way, because I think he did his normal workout and then added BFR as a finisher.
Okay.
And they started to increase intensity towards the championship. And pain was away, and he performed to his highest in the championship. And that is interesting, because normally most people wouldn't increase intensity in BFR. And if, put it in the show notes, it's pretty interesting. A cool story to read, and a cool reasoning is attached to this blog post. So that's
interesting as well, because it's really what's the word? Similar. Just add it in German. It's a really similar case study to yours, really. I guess like that's more or less what happened to you. You're trying the other modalities as well. You've got a lot of knowledge. It's always a little bit dangerous doing it on yourself. I find I'm a good coach for everyone else. I'm the worst coach for myself. But anyway, like I think if we're looking at like a more structural and from a physiological perspective, it sounds like a really similar case. Tried everything, didn't work. Good coach, good trainer, someone who knows how to work out, and then the blood flow seemed to make the difference. I have another question. So we'll go a couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up. So with what populations would you be looking to use this within the rehab process? So I'm about to start working with an ACL rehab client, and I think it would just be from the research I've looked into I've heard about this I've looked into it more or less for a couple of years within ACL rehab, and knee rehab's obviously a massive one. It's more or less what we've spoken about. But yeah, how would you see that? Or maybe do you have examples on how you might look to implement that with an ACL rehab client who plays a field-based sport or runs?
I would probably that it's nothing new to what I have been saying to everyone who could benefit from using lower intensities to save tissues from loading, because basically, at least that's something that also German physiotherapists already have put into their minds, like tissues have low tolerance. And if you go too up high in the load, tissues fail.
Yeah.
Boom, easy. So if you have a patient or client that could benefit from lowering load, then it's something really great. And Thomas always says he sees BFR as a bridge, because conventional heavy load resistance training is unique towards like neural adaptations, like rate coding, firing rate, recruitment of muscle fibers, and all that. So if you can't do that because of whatever injury, of whatever pain you are into, you can use BFR to augment your adaptations, even though you're training at low intensities.
Yeah, you could even do it at the start of the rehab process, though, right? Like not necessarily the very start, but like once someone's got full extension range of motion through their knee and have started doing some body weight and coordinative work, you know, like things like walking, maybe so base loading, single leg stands, probably even squats and that sort of stuff. Just trying to get multi-joint movement, more compound-based movements.
I mean, what we see post ACL, I mean, that's the most obvious thing, is this atrophy of the vastus medialis and
absolutely.
And why shouldn't I use a modality to get the same hypertrophic response to high load training? And he can do it pretty fast afterwards the surgery, right? So I would probably begin with a patient like that, using again isometrics, which are more safe than dynamic movements, and BFR, and then slowly integrating more dynamic stuff and still using BFR until tissues are prepared to bear the load of more either plyometric stuff, more high load intensity exercise resistance training wise, and I would add them slowly in. So probably after, I don't know, a couple, 2, 3, 4 months, I would probably start loading heavier, but still getting always this blood flow restriction in, for example, also as a finisher, to induce even more response towards the training, and slowly working on the low tolerance of his tissues, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
plus the hormonal response, like as we spoke about at the start, the hormonal response is the anabolic responses that drive synthesis and growth throughout the muscle. If we look at sort of more local or isolated muscle adaptations, it's pretty fucking fascinating, really.
And I think most people, like, you know, it's still, I think tendons and soft tissues, collagenous tissues, have become more attention lately, but still a lot of things still talk muscle, muscle, muscle. But what muscles are surrounded by collagenous tissue, right? So you have the contractile elements. Basically, everyone knows that, actin and myosin, but it's surrounded by other tissues. For example, like, or even they are put together by different molecules like titin, which sees more attention in research. And every muscle fiber is wrapped in collagenous tissue. And like 30-40% of the produced force by contractile elements is transmitted laterally and then towards tendon. And like, it's just, I think it's straightforward logic. If I say, hey, I can induce more collagenous growth or more growth of collagenous tissue within the muscle and the tendon and where else, and that should help me with applying more force and applying it more safely, because it's getting thicker and stronger, right? So, like, and if BFR can help with that, because of course after an injury, I mean, it's not just the muscle that sees atrophy. What do we see in collagenous tissue? We see the matrix degenerating. We see like cross-links, pathological cross-links that make the tissue stiff. And actually, of course, we want stiff tendons, but they should also be elastic enough, right? To take, for example, in high, like plyometrics, we want the tendon to be at this one point stiff, but also elastic.
Yeah.
So after injury, we have pretty stiff tissue, but that doesn't have a high load tolerance and being able to transmit forces at high velocities. So, and if that can help, if BFR can help me with that also, in addition to the muscular adaptations and the hormonal response and what we have already been talking about, we should consider that also. But it still sees sometimes less like attention from the world, because we are still often like, yeah, I mean, what do you see when you look at someone? You see muscles. You don't see so much collagenous tissue, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I have 2 more questions.
Yeah.
I think I already said I had 2 more questions, but fuck it, I have 2 more from now. Just a couple of really important questions, and I'll say them both at once because otherwise I'll forget or add another question. How hard or how tight would you wrap the cuff or the band? That's, I think, a really important thing to kind of know. I imagine it's subjective, but it'd just be really good to get your take on that. And the second one is contraindications. So who would this not be good for? I think that's also very, very important to clarify.
Probably is. So when using practical BFR, where you just use an elastic wrap or whatever you find in your mama's basement, basically, what it is said that you use in pressure, like when you use a numerical scale, like 0 to 10, like you wrap the band around your leg around a 7.
Okay.
Well, it feels like a 7 for you. If you wrap your arms, it should be more like a 4 or 5, because of course the arteries and the veins are closer to the skin. So you don't need to apply so much pressure, because in the leg, of course, more like tissue protects everything, right? Because too much pressure, of course, can result in damage. Like, absolutely. So that is straightforward, of course, again. But so a 7 for the legs, a 4 to 5 for the arms. Mm-hmm. And what one can do, it's probably a good tip. Like if you use always the same band, wrap it, train with it, feel or get that the value, and then mark it on the elastic wrap, so you always attach it the same way. And another thing is that when it's normal, so for example, you train your arm, it's normal that it gets red, right? Because blood is pooling, but it shouldn't look blue. If it starts to look blue and it tickles in your fingers, take it off. Pressure is too high, right? So it shouldn't get any tingling. No, that isn't really what one is looking for, right? Mm-hmm. But if it is, take it off, wait for 2 or 3 minutes, wrap it again, because actually you can also take it off between sets. That's sometimes been done. Of course, it takes a bit more time. You can do it and still see results. So that is also, if you don't feel so good, you could try it. And of course, there's like, with every training modality, after a couple of uses, most often people feel better. Yeah. Because it's an unusual feeling at the start, right? So you will slowly get into it and not jump right into the water. And from the contraindications, I mean, what are we actually restricting? The cardiac system, right? Mm-hmm. So everyone with a history in cardiac system problems, at least there should be, Kat comes in. She opened the door. You should be at least pay attention. And I would say everyone who has cardiac problems, no matter which, should speak to someone who is really into the topic and who's educated, and not believing the bros over in the gym. That could be something which isn't so good. Pregnancy is of course something we don't want to see that into because of the higher blood pressure. Then thrombosis patients, even though studies have looked into it and didn't found a higher risk profile, but still there's a scarcity in research and we should wait for that. So like always, I mean, if you don't feel right, don't use it, right? Yeah. So if you don't feel safe with applying it, don't apply it. Like that's probably something that every human should be able to do, but of course, everything that relates to the blood system could be a possible contraindication and should be spoken on with an educated practitioner. Yeah, that's awesome. It's good to know that. It's good to just clarify that as well. Like it does have a lot of really good uses until it doesn't, or until until someone's not comfortable. Like it's great, use it, but if you don't feel comfortable, just don't fucking use it. Like let's be really clear with that. Like the research is really sound and everything on that, but as we mentioned, your mind dictates a lot, and if you're fearful about it, then you're probably not going to get the response you want, or just generally it's probably just not worth it. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, right? That's with everything. Like I wouldn't do a keto diet because like I'm not feeling for it. I'm not feeling comfortable with it. So why should I stress myself getting through it when there are other options available? So you have basically a couple of options. You could educate yourself, speak with a practitioner who is into the topic, and then slowly start using the modality and see what's all about. So that is probably the most safe way to get into a training modality. I mean, you wouldn't put someone and you don't feel comfortable, and you wouldn't say, okay, we do cleans with 80% of your 1 rep max and just throw them into doing Olympic lifting style stuff. I mean, at least if you're a good coach. I mean,
There's always one.
Yeah.
Last question. In 30 seconds or less, what would your ideal work and life setup look like in the future?
I think the most ideal thing would be working in a youth academy, because I would find it interesting to follow like developing athletes for years and really trying and experimenting and see what works. Other point is being self-employed with a clinic that serves Gen Pop and sporting related issues, and also professional athletes, getting them to high performance.
Come to Berlin and I'll set it up with you. Berlin's better than Hamburg.
Yeah, probably. I said to my girlfriend, because we look so basically a bit the same with the mustache and the hairstyle. And your girlfriend paints and it is an artist. My girlfriend paints and it is an artist. I said to her, I want to invite him to come over to Hamburg, have a good sleep over here, and getting a bit into Hamburg.
Let's do it. I told my girlfriend straight away that that your girlfriend's an artist and that she's just said, fuck it, I'm going to do it full time. I am an artist now. And she's just changed her belief system. And my girlfriend was buzzing about that.
Yeah, it sounds great.
It sounds good. It would be hilarious. I had this dream to set up a performance and rehab, a little facility with a coffee bar at the front, so that I could make some cappuccinos like a couple of days a week or a couple of mornings a week, and then just do like private rehab clients and work with athletes and stuff in the back, and then get them to just grab a coffee and like a nice protein ball or something on the way out. That's my dream. So I don't know if you're keen, mate. Yeah. If you're keen, thanks for your time, man. It was really, really insightful. It was awesome to catch up. Awesome to get your detailed understanding and expertise within the area. And I'll no doubt link the stuff that you mentioned. So have a great day, and hopefully we'll be making the trip to Hamburg soon. Yeah, great. Have a nice day too. Thanks for the invitation, and see you hopefully. Pleasure. All right.
The Between Two Lines podcast, talking about performance, life, and everything in between. Featuring your hosts, Jonny Stamm and Ash Hamilton.